morning. All right, we're getting the show on the road. Thank you all very much for joining us today. I know that this table over here to my left is going to be a problem. I'm warning you guys right now. No, not you. Yes, correct. Not you. Them. You know who you are. So my name is Carlos Carrillo. I'm the executive director of the South Florida chapter of the Associated General Contractors of America. Thank you all very much for joining us. Our first meeting of 2023. So a very belated Happy New Year to everyone. The second Wednesday safety session, all of our second Wednesday safety sessions are presented by our title sponsor, Milwaukee. I want to thank Dariel for being with us here today. Having a great setup over there. Thank you, Dariel, and the entire Milwaukee team. We appreciate your support. I would also like to thank the team at Universal Engineering, who is our sponsor. They are our breakfast sponsor, so thank you very much for providing some food today. This is their first official meeting as sponsor, and that being the case, I'd like to invite Sean Glenn up here to join us and tell us a little bit about the Universal Engineering team and what your role is with them.
My name's Sean Glenn. I'm with Universal Engineering Sciences. We offer strong safety programs and they yield strong returns. I'm not going to talk a lot. I have a few flyers up here if you want to grab one or ask me any questions and how we can assist. But we're basically trying to increase compliance and profitability with safety consulting services that we can offer. Please grab a flyer, ask any questions afterwards. We can do anything from a job site visit all the way up to OSHA 30 training. We have recently brought on a former OSHA compliance officer of 25 years who's now on our side and can help any and all of you guys with anything that you might need help. Thanks. Look forward to the breakfast.
Thank you, Sean. And for those of you joining us via Zoom, got to try and make it in one day. It's fantastic half hour of networking that we have here for our safety folks that are in attendance. So thank you very much. I'd also like to thank the team at Kelley Kronenberg for being our host always. The Kelley Kronenberg Cafe, it's actually my favorite spot, even though I know we go to the boardroom. But I love being in here. I love the vibe of the room, and I really appreciate Kelley Kronenberg for giving us this support. So that being said, this morning, we have the privilege of discussing two important topics. Changes to enforcement policy at OSHA and heavy equipment safety. So coming up first, again, to our Kelley Kronenberg team, we have Angelou Filippi, a partner here at Kelley Kronenberg. Angelou has dedicated his practice to labor and employment law, and many of our members use Angelou as their attorney. He is the OSHA specialist. Today, he joins us to discuss the aforementioned policy changes. So Angelou, please come on up and join us.
So I'm not here to give you good news. OSHA has put out some new guidance to its investigators with regard to what's called, actually they put out two papers, one of which was dealing with the instance-to-instance violations. Does everybody know what instance-to-instance violations are? So in the past, I mean, this is not a new policy. They've simply expanded it. So in the past, when OSHA found a willful violation, and actually to apply this particular policy, they had to find what they called, or what everybody in the trade called, a willful plus violation. That was a willful violation that met one of the following criteria. There was a fatality or multiple hospitalizations, persistently high rates of worker injuries with that particular employer, an extensive history by the employer of OSHA violations, and the conduct amounted to clear bad faith. So if all of those things existed, OSHA said in the past, and this has been in existence for years, that they could cite for every instance of exposure. So if you had a number of workers who, for example, were violating the fall protection standard, instead of citing you for a fall protection standard and penalizing you for a serious or willful well, in this case, a willful violation, they would cite you for each employee that was exposed to that violation or to that hazard and who violated the standard, and apply a willful to each and every one of those violations. The ching, exactly. They've now, with this new guidance, expanded that policy. How have they done that? There's now a much lower bar. And so they can now issue what they call IBI, instance by instance violations, to violations characterized as serious and other than serious, so long as the violations are determined by OSHA to be or relate to high gravity violations. And that's the key to all of this. What is a high gravity violation? Well, first of all, what type of instances will OSHA apply this to? So they'll apply it to citations that are related to a fatality. And that is similar to their prior willful plus egregious standard. They'll apply it where an employer has received a willful or a repeat or a failure to abate violation within the past 5 years. They'll apply it where you fail to report a fatality, inpatient hospitalization, amputation, or loss of an eye pursuant to their reporting regulations. And they'll apply it in cases where there are serious injuries. So what is high gravity? So high gravity is, well, high gravity previously, before this, only mattered to you with respect to the penalty. Okay, so it really wasn't, it had nothing to do, the important thing to you previously was what was the classification of the violation? Was it a other than serious, a serious, or a willful? And previously, we would attempt to either reduce or vacate the citations to lower characterizations or vacate them entirely. But now this gravity situation, or the gravity determination rather, becomes a lot more important. To determine gravity, they look at two things. They look at the severity of the injury or illness that could result from the alleged violation and the probability. High severity are those that pose a risk of death, permanent disability, or chronic irreversible illness. Medium hazards pose a risk of temporary injuries or reversible illnesses, and low severity pose a risk of temporary injuries or reversible illnesses that do not result in hospitalization. If the severity is high, then they're going to look at probability. Greater probability results when likelihood that an injury or illness will occur is judged to be relatively high. And what do they look at to determine that? Because how can you determine probability except by speculation? So what they do is they look at the number of employees involved, the frequency and duration of exposure, the proximity of the employee to the hazardous condition, and the use of appropriate PPE. They look at whether you have a medical surveillance program, the age of your employees, training on the recognition and avoidance of the hazardous condition. And I would say they're going to look at your program. Okay? If you have a program, what is a program? Program is you train your employees, you monitor the work site, you discipline employees for violations of a safety policy. Those are the things, those are the core elements. They look at other things, but those are the core elements that OSHA wants to see in terms of a program.
Angela, question.
Yeah,
Will safety orientation be considered training?
absolutely. Absolutely.
Safety meetings, if I'm not mistaken, are also considered part of continued training.
Safety meetings, absolutely. Toolbox talks, absolutely. I have a case now involving a situation where there was a fatality. A truck went into water, somebody drowned. And 2 weeks before, there was an incident where a truck had gotten too close to the water. And the safety person for the company came in and had a talk with everybody about not getting too close to the water. I'm arguing that's training because they did issue the 20B1. I don't see why that isn't training. Anybody disagree with that?
On the job.
On the job training. I'm also arguing in that case that you can substitute experience for training. So if I have a guy who's been doing the same job for 10 years, has had the prior training, has never had an accident, to me, that's sufficient to show that person is competent. So the program thing, when you're dealing with these high gravity, or what they're going to allege is a high gravity offense, in my view, having a program is going to go a long ways towards arguing against these instance by instance violations. Instance by instance means that they can cite for every employee that was exposed. Instance by instance means that, for example, if you have a machine shop and there's unguarded machines, previously they'd issue a single citation for unguarded machines. If there's an unfortunate accident that occurs and somebody gets hurt on an unguarded machine, that there's the potential for OSHA to cite you for every machine that's unguarded separately, and for every employee operator that was exposed. Everybody knows they've just raised their penalties, right? We got 15,600 and change for serious, 156,000, et cetera, for a willful or a repeat. But just looking at a serious, if you have 3 machines that are unguarded and 10 operators who work those 3 machines, do the math. Previously, you'd only get 2 citations. Now you're going to get 12 citations at 15,600 a pop.
When you mean exposed, let's say it's got or Angelou and a hazard's here. Is there going to be like a distance where he's really not jeopardy of getting hurt with the machine over here?
Yeah, in that type of situation, I mean, you're not dealing with the exposure as much as a defense where there is case law under OSHA that says the means and operation of the machine is relevant to whether or not somebody is exposed to a hazard. So that would be potentially a defense, but initially you're going to get that. If I'm an operator on that machine, you're going to get that citation. Yeah.
So you mentioned training and trying to present to the case that the conversation of staying away was training. Does it have the training have to be documented? according to compliance or?
Best practice, yes. Does it has to be? No. But I would strongly suggest that any training you do, even the situation where someone goes out to the site and does something remedial with a person who maybe they, during an inspection violated a policy, document every instance of employee training. And remember what I was trying to express before is that training is not just something formal where you bring everybody together, you have a log, everybody signs in, and you follow a content for a particular issue that creates a hazard. Training is much broader than that. Okay, so any situation where you bring employees together, or an employee, a single employee, and talk to them about safety, hazards, policy of the company with regard to safety, anything like that should be documented. Because again, OSHA, they like to see the paper. Yeah.
Good rule of thumb I heard was if it's not documented, it didn't happen.
Yeah, that's what OSHA is going to say.
Yeah, I was just curious in your case, conversation.
That particular situation was not documented, but it's corroborated by several witnesses. And so in litigation, to me, that's sufficient, because when we go before a judge, if we're consistent, the judge is going to believe it. If we're not consistent, I'm in trouble.
We use and truck back and up don't do this, or this is how it could be done. We're considering that training.
Yes.
So if that's documented and you write that in a report or something, and tell that person that this is part of your training or something, or if you don't, if it's documented that way that you are the safety guy that's writing that person up, or that you spoke to him about backing up, that's good for the company, and now you have that on.
That's absolutely good for the company, and even better for the company is that person, by doing that, violated a safety rule. And so you want to discipline them, give them a letter of warning, because those two things together are significant in that OSHA will give more credibility to your program if you not only train them, but where they violate safety rules, you discipline them. Very important, the two together, discipline and training, okay? If you're not disciplining people, you're training them and they repeat the violation of a safety rule again and again, OSHA is going to say not only is the training irrelevant because it's not effective, and your policy for discipline is irrelevant because you don't use it. So that's worst case scenario. Best case scenario is do the training, do the discipline, and if the employee does it again, either terminate them or give them more discipline, suspend them, whatever, just to show that you have a safety program that you take seriously. And if that employee is disciplined and trained and never does it again, you're effective too. Those are all things that OSHA will look at, not only in the course of a regular investigation where we're not looking at instances, but I think when we're looking at this instance by instance issue, that's going to go a long way. Because remember, I said one of the factors is bad faith. Bad faith to me means you don't have a program, or you don't have a program that's effective, or your employees don't take it seriously because you're not pushing them on it. But if you have all of that, I think we're going to avoid these instance by instance violations. The other thing I wanted to mention is the bureaucratic process. It remains to be seen whether OSHA, the area offices, I mean, this just came out 2 weeks ago. It remains to be seen whether or not they're even going to try this, because they have to go through myriad hoops to even get authority from region, and in some cases national, to issue these instance by instance citations. But we need to know it's out there. We need to know what to do to avoid them. Because one situation could result in massive fine.
I saw this when it came out a couple of weeks ago. So I'm shaking my head. You know, there.
Yes, they have.
It's available.
It's available, yes, yes. The other thing they did was they reminded, there was another memorandum that they reminded district directors or area directors that they need not group. Does everyone know what I mean by grouping citations? So if you have a citation for a particular issue, let's say fall protection, and you have exposed employees who are not wearing their fall protection, you have a failure to train for fall protection, they may group those two together. In the past, they've typically done so in the offices in Florida. Those types of issues they've grouped together. The directors have been told, you don't need to do that, meaning don't do that. So now they're going to issue separate violations, even though one issue falls from the other. Okay. Any other questions?
What about from the start getting tagged? He get dragged into it, or they dragged into it?
I think in the context of a general contractor where I think it's going to be very difficult for them to do a controlling contractor instance by instance violation. First of all, they'd have to have all those elements with respect to the general contractor. And remember, the general contractor is held to a different standard than the exposing employer. Okay, so there's a reasonableness standard for a controlling employer or a controlling entity, such as a general contractor versus the employer who is exposing its own employees. So I don't think this policy applies directly to situations with controlling employers, but that remains to be seen. Yeah, I mean, they've issued this policy and we'll see whether or not the different offices are applying it consistently. You have different directors who are more aggressive, less aggressive, and so you may get different.
It's all waiting on case laws to start.
There's no case law on this yet. I looked it up and I don't see anything. I mean, there are case laws for the old policy, willful plus, but not on this. This came out January 26th. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Angelo. So we appreciate it's a return to our Ask Angelo sessions, which we used to do. We may have to bring those back. I appreciate you bringing up case law over there. You've been watching Matlock reruns lately. Good stuff. Hey, just something for you all to be aware of, something that we're monitoring, kind of to follow up on what Angelo's speaking. We talked about OSHA's heat standards here a couple times and what they're trying to do. Miami-Dade County has picked up that football, and Miami-Dade County is looking at imposing those heat standards and now being monitored by Miami-Dade County. Yeah, so I'm going to keep you guys up to date on what's going on with that. It is a monitoring that we at AGC are, it's an issue that we at AGC are monitoring. And it's a little bit troubling because it's like another excuse for them to come onto your job sites and poke around. So there you go. So because you're not mic'd, so out of the Tampa offices, the two last cases that you were involved in, they asked for heat training from those specific contractors. Yeah, so, and I guarantee you, if it's coming from Miami-Dade, if Miami-Dade County is looking at this, then it'll eventually migrate into Broward, Palm Beach, and then you'll see it in Central Florida and the Gulf Coast counties. So that's usually the way that these issues pop. So just something for you. Yes, sir, Mr. Trusky. So the question was, do we AGC have a task force dealing with that? No, I'm just monitoring. However, that's a great idea. So if we want to put a task force together to look at that, that's something that I'm absolutely open to doing. So I'll touch base with you after that. And for those of you watching on Zoom, or for those of you here in the room, if that's something you'd be interested in doing, I'd absolutely appreciate some help from our members. So please feel free to contact us. Okay, cool. Thank you very much. I love this group. This is, you safety folks are a great group to work with. You're always here on time talking about that. So it's another bonus in South Florida. So, hey, all right, enough with the bad jokes. Our second session today, our second portion of today's session comes courtesy of our friends at Sunbelt Rentals. Joining us to discuss heavy equipment safety today is someone with an incredible wealth of experience. And I say that just not to quote exactly how many years it is total. But I'm really excited to bring up Sunbelt's Regional Safety Manager, Mr. Jose de Avila. Jose, come on up. We're going to give him a second to set up his PowerPoint presentation.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for that intro. So let me ask you before we get started, veterans, any veterans in the room? Veterans? Awesome. Thank you for your service. All the veterans, any devil dogs? No devil dogs? Devil dogs? Okay, gotta keep on it. All right. I got two sons. I was in the Army, but ended up with two sons in the Marines. One with the 29th up in California, and yep. And then the other one ended up, he was a grunt actually with the 7th Marine. And then the other one is with Marine Intelligence, which I try to explain to him as an Army guy. There's, that's an oxymoron, Marine Intelligence. But there were good battles there at home. My wife used to kiss. All right, let me share my screen. So I imagine that everyone here is a safety professional, or where are my safety professionals?
Oh, it's pretty much.
Going, I'm preaching to the choir then. All righty. Is this showing? Not showing, right? This is showing now. There it is. Yeah, don't feel bad about turning your back towards me and watching the monitor. So yes, I've been working with Sunbelt Rentals for just over 7 years and almost 35 years in safety. And in those 35 years in safety, started way down as a field safety rep. So that was about as low as a pregnant end. That was the very first base, that I started with, and it was a great experience. It was a great opportunity because it allowed me to just gain that knowledge that I've used to do what I really enjoy the most, which is just trying to help people understand. Right? Gone are the days of the safety cop, where the safety professional was out there in the field with a little note, taking names and writing tickets. Right? It is more, the safety professional is more of a coach, in my opinion, my humble opinion. I respect everybody's opinion, but more of a safety coach, teaching, coaching the frontline leadership, so that the frontline leadership understands what is required to have proper implementation of a safety program that's going to carry the day, right? We have people that are either involved or engaged. What's the difference between involved and engaged? An involved employee is one that knows how to do the job and does the job effectively from the moment they come in to the moment they leave. At Sunbelt Rentals, we look at involved versus engagement. An engaged employee is the one that does all of that, but knows how to do it safely. And we don't measure safety as in the absence of incident, right? Because you can play the Russian roulette with a 6-shooter, right? And hit an empty chamber 5 times, and that does not mean that you're safe. That means that you are lucky, right? So with that in mind, I wanted to talk about heavy equipment operations and considerations. And I know I'm preaching to the choir. Most of the stuff here you probably know by heart, but it's just a matter of just bringing things into proper focus and reminding everyone, because a little reminder goes a long way, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about some definitions. I'm going to talk about the Bureau of Labor Statistics, some stats. I'm going to talk about no zone around heavy equipment, mounting and dismounting, high voltage lines, excavations, and then most importantly, who's the captain of that ship, right? When we're looking at an operation, a heavy equipment that is operating, who is the captain of that ship? Now, when we talk about heavy equipment, right? What is heavy equipment? How do we define heavy equipment? Most of the time, when we think about heavy equipment, we look at a big crane in the tilt-up project there, right? Or we look at the bulldozer, or we look at a heavy excavator with a long reach arm. But I think it's important for us to just take the blinders off, and when we consider heavy equipment as anything that is heavier than a pickup truck, and if you have a very small construction project, right, and the heaviest equipment that you have is a scissors lift there on the bottom left, then that's a heavy equipment that you got to worry about that is going to give you the exposure, right? There's a difference between hazards and exposure. There's all kinds of hazards going on out there, right, on the highway. All kinds of hazards. We have no exposure because we're here, but the moment that we get out there in that environment, then we have exposure. So that's the difference between hazard and exposure. And when we're looking at exposure, you know, that may be it. And if that is it, that little scissors lift, then that's what we got to worry about. That's what we have to focus on. That's where the conversation has to be around, right? So, major, by the way, Marine, Devil Dog, HE has nothing to do with high explosive. That's heavy equipment, right? So major impacts on heavy equipment operations. Just think about pilot error, right? Most of the time when an aircraft comes down and they do an investigation, most of the time, they're gonna identify it as pilot error, human error. There was a mistake made because there's all kinds of programs, there's all kinds of methods of abatement, but something happened that the pilot or the crew didn't do, right? And in this case, the crew is the pilot of that ship, right? The pilot of that, the person that is operating that heavy equipment. What did he do or fail to do that caused that issue, right? 75% of property damage are consequence of making a mistake, that human error or that negligence, and 58% of them result in injury or death. What we call in Sunbelt Rentals either stick potential or stick actual. Stick stands for STCK, stuff that can kill, but you can take that stuff and you can, the first word, and change it for any word that starts with S that fits your vocabulary, right? Now, here are some accident classifications involving heavy equipment operations, right? Whether the person is pinned down, and how do you find what the classification is? There's a lot of times when people just take a look at a person to blame and says, well, it's that person made a mistake, without understanding that the moment that you have a finger pointing out at someone, as I like to tell people, I don't point fingers, because if I point a finger at you, I got 3 fingers pointing right back at me, which is the reason why in the military they point like this, right? All fingers, right? It's all your fault. So when we are looking at classification of an incident, the classification has to come out after a real good, thorough investigation, identifying the root cause, and that'll get you to that classification. The classification then comes the common injuries associated with involving heavy equipment operations. I'm not a slide reader. I'm just going to talk through it. You can read the slide as obviously, I've been doing, but when you're looking at injuries involving heavy equipment operation, and the best one or the least impactful there is bleeding, then you're talking about some heavy stuff. Heavy equipment is unforgiving. And as I always tell my son, a machine is always waiting for you to make a mistake. It's just laying low, waiting for you to make a mistake. And the moment that you make a mistake, or you go into what we call at Sunbelt Rentals, a brain hazard, right? A brain associated hazard that the brain is not. Have you guys ever noticed when you're driving, either you're driving to the project or especially when you're driving home, and you get to a point in which like, man, I can't believe I made it this far. And there's very little recollection of a certain amount of distance that you travel, or perhaps the majority of it. Okay, that's going too fast on the brain, right? That's fast brain mode. When the brain is making the decisions for you based on information that's stored in the brain versus you analyzing your exposure as you're moving down the road. If your brain is disengaged, running on fast brain mode, is going to make the decisions based on stored information. And if you run into an unforeseen, that the brain is going to have to be snapped into slow brain mode, right? Figure out there is a hazard right there. What am I going to do about the hazard? React to it, and then stop the vehicle or stop the motion. All of that takes time. Meanwhile, you're moving. So brain center hazards are going to be most of the stuff that is going to be involved in common injuries and the classifications that we just mentioned. Okay, we are not doing good. When you compare the statistics between 2021 and 2020, you see that there's a 10% of increase, and a 10% of increase when you're looking at 5,190 fatalities in 2021. Heavy equipment takes 800 of those fatalities, right? And 18,000 injuries involving that, right? So I had to find that picture of that little boy, because it is all about him. It is all about him, right? If you give me an opportunity to choose what I would rather be doing right now, I can tell you I'd rather have a cigar in my hand with my favorite adult drink, or be out there fishing or flying. I love flying, right? But why am I here? I'm here because I had to take care of my family. And I imagine that all of you do, just like all of those folks that are out there on your job site and mine, right? So it is all about him. So when we're talking about safety with someone and we're trying to engage that person in a safety performance of their job, we got to bring that little boy or that little girl into proper focus, right? Have conversations that are transformational versus conversations that are transactional. So let's talk a little bit about no zone, the no zone about around equipment. And you can draw a gray area around any equipment that you see. Some of the gray areas could be on equipment that we see right out that window right now, right? Which is going to vary based on the configuration of the equipment and based on how the equipment is set up. So when you're looking at a hydraulic crane, most definitely, if you look at that cab, right? If you look at that cab, that operator is going to have very little visibility just about around the equipment, and zero visibility at all when you consider the boom, the back end of the boom, where the counterweights are, when the spools are. There's just no visibility. Whether he's got the boom up, it doesn't matter. He's not going to be able to see there. If you're looking at a chute, we refer to it as shooting boom. Some people call it high reach. Some other people call it a telehandler. But the only way that shooting boom or telehandler or high reach is going to operate, move from point A to point B, is if you lifts a little bit on the boom. And the moment that you start raising the boom, then you have the boom right there that just blocks your vision 100%. And that's why it's extended towards the right that much, right? Now, every job site is configured differently, but you may have either the three hazardous work zones, or you may have a combination of them where everything, if it's a small job site, it could be just one specific area where everything is. But if you have a large enough construction site, you'll have these three hazardous area where you have the work area where stuff is going on, the staging area where equipment is stored overnight, and then a fuel or repair area where the machines are being, that's exactly it, right? Either the operator takes a piece of equipment out there to fuel it or to get it repaired. Sometimes the equipment is held at the work area and then repair or refueling happens there. But if you have equipment that is moving around, you have a high danger zone right smack in the middle, because that's exactly where people are going to be moving also, right? Now, some people call it 3 points of control. Some people call it 3 points of contact. To me, this is contact, right? This is contact. There's no control at all. So when we're talking about accessing, either mounting or dismounting the piece of equipment, it really requires 3 points of control where I am controlling either my climbing or my descending from that piece of equipment, right? Going up with a lunchbox, a piece of paper, a clipboard, and you see it, right? Well, I'm going to go ahead and use my both hands, but I want to take this clipboard and tuck it under my hand, under my arm. Then you have no control at all. You're at the mercy of a lot of circumstances associated with a work environment, which may be completely different from the last place where he operated that piece of equipment. All right, don't laugh. Don't laugh. Let me just walk you through this. Okay? Please don't laugh. Oh, try not to laugh. Ay, Dios mío. All right, so if you look at what's going on with the left foot and you look at the face, the pain has not set in yet. But you look at the right foot, the foot is off the ground already, right? The moment that the ankle makes contact with the ground, then the angle of that foot is going to be such that the pain is going to be felt and the person is coming down, right or wrong, right? That is the same thing that's going to happen with perhaps a different looking equipment operator, right? But if that equipment operator is descending from that piece of equipment, okay, and he or she puts a foot down, by the time, even before the foot is completely down and is carrying the weight of the body, the other foot is already off of the last step, or it is at such an angle that when the ankle begins to turn, because I as the equipment operator have stepped on a boulder, on a rock, on uneven soil, I am not going to be able to recover and get back on that foot. That ankle is going to give, and the person is going to come to the ground. This is a very popular injury, right? Because the person is coming down, they're coming down, and where's their head? What is on the ground? I got to be careful. No, they're thinking about the next thing that they're going to do, and they're in, as I mentioned before, fast brain mode. They're not thinking about it, and they're going to be thinking about it when the ankle makes contact with the ground, and by then it's too late. Hopefully, they end up with a fracture versus a soft tissue injury, because if you end up with a fracture, it's a lot easier to recover, right? And to get back to maximum medical improvement than if you end up with a badly twisted ligament or tendon or things like that, right? Don't jump. How many times do you see? I see a lot of people that jump from our 18-wheelers, right? The 18-wheelers that you see, the green 18-wheelers that are carrying our equipment. You see people that are jumping off. You see people that are jumping off, when they get out of the basket, there's people that are right out here. You see them jumping off. And that's probably the worst case that could happen. Just like you would see people that are coming down from a piece of equipment and they have their back towards the piece of equipment versus facing the piece of equipment and coming down. When you have your back towards it, you have to think about what's going on with the feet, right? When you have your back towards it, only the heel is on the step. When you have your face towards it, all your foot is in the step. So you have more of a controlled descent than if you have your back towards it. It's just those little details that we have to be, safety professionals. Sometimes people say like, you guys, you're not doing anything because we're standing there and looking at the operation, right? We can walk through that construction site right there and we can see some things. If we stand there and we watch, we understand not what's going on, but the reasons why, right? Which is more impacting, more important, in my opinion. When we're looking at high voltage lines, right? We all know the stats, and I'll show you some of the distances and stuff, but I think that's common knowledge to most. But this is what BLS says right there in the middle, right? We understand that the higher the voltage, the less proximity you got to have, because electricity is always looking for the path of least resistance. All you have to do is just get close enough for that electricity to reach out and touch it, right? And it's going to look for the path of least resistance. In the image there, that path of least resistance is identified as the crane because you see the center, right? The center of the impact is basically the base of that crane. However, if there's a tagline on that load, like we're required to have a tagline, right? And the person that is on the ground is holding on to that tagline as we should be in order to control it, then that's going to be the path of least resistance. And some folks says, well, if a person is in contact with electricity, I'm going to use a piece of wood in order to help them break them. Do you understand that there's all of the channels that are inside of the wood hold moisture? So therefore, when you hold a piece of wood and you're trying to disconnect somebody that is energized and can't let go, as a reaction, the moment that you use wood, the electricity will travel through the moisture that's held in the wood and is going to come in and get you, right? So where is the center, the impact zone that is going to be associated with contact with electricity or proximity with electricity? It just depends on what's going on. But definitely, the further out you go, when you look at those circles, the less voltage is going to be. And we all know that one thing is amperage and another thing is voltage. And I think that, and some of you may be able to correct me, and please, I invite you to do so. But its voltage is identified as the water in the hose, and amperage is identified as the pressure on that water that's gonna push the water through, right? So, but the higher the voltage, then the higher the amperage, obviously, to push that electricity through the wire. So if we have any kind of cables that are going overhead, whether they're bare, which would indicate high voltage, or whether they're covered, which would indicate lower voltage, it could be 480, right? It is up to us to make sure that we understand what's going on through those wires so that we can put the proper signage on the ground, right? Because those equipment operators, they're not looking up to see the wires, they're looking on the ground to identify what the hazard is, and that's where the signage has to be, right? That's the danger zone. How do I protect myself from overhead hazards? And then just understanding those distances that just about everybody knows, right? Most people says, well, 10 feet, because that's what OSHA said. At Sunbelt Rentals, we double that. We said, it's 20 feet, right? And we need, if we don't know what's going on through the lines, it's 20 feet proximity. You can't get any closer than that, right? And that's, of course, is not just a piece of equipment, but what is that piece of equipment carrying or doing? Because there are times where the boom of that crane may be very far from it, but then as the boom encroaches that area, you'll see that the cable is the one that comes into proximity, so that the electricity is going to come to the cable versus making contact with the boom. So they always tell us, don't walk if you're in a piece of equipment. Actually, if you are in a piece of equipment, if it's in some cases, it may be safer for you to remain inside of the piece of equipment than to jump out. But it all depends on what's going on. Because if you have a crane, or if you have any piece of equipment that's got outriggers on it, then that's going to be the path of least resistance, the outriggers, and then the hydraulic lines are going to ignite. The hydraulic fuel is going to ignite, and then you're going to have a very volatile situation. The main thing is to let the folks know, regardless of what's going on, if you try to run, that's where it's going to get you. Some people say that you should shuffle so that you don't pick up your foot. Some other folks says you need to hop, right? so that you're hopping, as you remember that circle that we were talking about, you're hopping from one energy source or one level of energy to the next, and it's the possibilities are less. What happens many times when we see, and I don't know if you guys have ever seen the videos of 4 guys that are moving a rolling scaffold on a construction site, and all of a sudden the scaffold makes contact with an overhead power line, and you see that, you know, it won't let go, right? So it's the same thing that happens in confined spaces. In confined spaces, most of the time, the people that work in a crew are very closely related. So when they see someone that goes down, the automatic thing is go to help, right? And that's where you end up with multiple fatalities or multiple injuries. So it's important that when people see that there's a piece of equipment that is energized, that we back off, we sound off, you know, whatever system we have, warning system, so that everybody's aware of what's happening, and we need to stay away from there, right? Until that piece of equipment is de-energized, or that line is de-energized. I think we talked about this. All right, excavations. Excavation is another issue. There's another area where exposure really does exist. How close to the edge of the excavation can we allow a heavy piece of equipment to come to, right? When you look at South Florida, there's different types of of ground or soil classification or soil types. The closer you get down to the Keys, then the rockier it is. It's a little bit more solid. If you go and you start excavating up where I live in West Palm, it's real sandy. So you're going from solid rock to a type C or class C type soil. So you have to be real careful, because that's going to determine where you're going to put your barriers. Are you going to put them closer to the excavation because it's basically you're dealing with solid rock, or are you going to have to move it further back, right? All right, so I gotta, you know, how do you translate Pepe Gandinga? So Pepe Gandinga, I guess in proper English, it would have to be like Joe Guts, right? So we have Joe Guts because it takes a lot of guts to be in a situation like that. My buddy Pepe has different exposures there. Of course, we have the spoiled dirt that is immediately, up to the edge of the excavation, right? Which is a big no-no. We got to have a minimum of 2 feet, right? And then the heavy equipment has to be a little bit beyond that, because there are different dynamics, again, going back to the classification or the type of soil that you're dealing with, right? There's going to be different impacts on the soil. Most people think that if the excavation is going to cave in, it's going to be like up there where the spoiled dirt is, right? That is going to come in, it's going to break up, it's going to come in. And they fail to understand that given the load that is on the ground, you may have a bulge that develops halfway down the excavation that entraps a person, and he doesn't have to cover their head in order to kill them, right? All they have to do is just cover up to the chest, and you're looking at the person's eyes and you're having a conversation until he can no longer breathe, and you're going to see that person die in front of your eyes. So we got to take care of Pepe there. So who's the captain of the ship? To us, the captain of the ship is the person that is making the ultimate go or no go decision. And that is the equipment operator. And that is the importance, it brings home the importance of making sure that we engage for every employee, that employees understand that there is proper lines, safe lines of communication, that there's no penalty when you say, no, hold on, Pablo, this can't happen. We need to have a conversation to understand why that equipment operator is saying that, right? Because we may be placing that equipment operator into greater hazard. You know, he fears for the job, he's got a family to feed, and he's told, do it, he's going to do it, and he's not going to be comfortable with it, but then he's going to run into the situation, right? Where there's just no way out. We have to rely on the knowledge and experience of that equipment operator to make sure that that thing is completed in a safe manner so we can get to the next one, right? That employee is going to go to bat if he knows that if he feels comfortable, there's proper lines of communication, it's safe for him or her to say, no, hold on for a second, time out, right? If that person believes that, then you have an employee that's going to go to bat for you, right? 100% all the time. Have you ever heard of a supervisor tell you that, no, man, we cannot afford to do this. This is a high ticket item. We got to get in, get out quickly, right? If that supervisor cannot afford to do something right, then that supervisor most definitely cannot afford to have anything go wrong on there. So that's where it's important. It's going to be important that we take the necessary steps, measure things out, measure twice, cut once, right? That we know that we're going to get in, how we're going to get in, how we're going to get everything done, how we're going to get out. So we talked about definitions. We talked about BLS stats. We talked about no zones. We talked about getting on the equipment and dismounting, right? High voltage lines, excavation, and then who's the captain? Any questions?
Is there guidelines that I have heard on heavy equipment excluding the high lift, the forklift, scissor lift, full lift, you know, your front end, the bull lift? Is there training that's required?
Most definitely, there's training that's required. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to use your question for to segue into, you know, when you think about Sunbelt rentals, you're thinking about a rental, an equipment rental company, right? And I just like to invite you to take the blinders off, right? And when you think about Sunbelt rentals, you look at a company that can be your partner in doing whatever to help you to get you to do whatever you're trying to do, right? Whether it's exactly that, right? Heavy equipment training, not just your certification on a boom lift or a forklift, but training on other pieces of equipment. We got a new division here in Miami, which is the heavy dirt equipment division. We'll train you there, OSHA 10-hour, OSHA 30-hour, first aid, CPR, AED, any of those things. And it's just like on training, it's just like your forklift inspection, as an example. You can do your forklift inspection, and you don't have to do it in a documented manner, like the attorney mentioned earlier, right? The best practice is to make sure that you have that document, because that document is going to set you free. When they start looking, when OSHA comes in and starts looking for documentation, can you provide proof of training? And you start, you know, providing documents, right, that are current. That's gonna help you. Thank you. Does that, I don't know, does that answer your question? Mahomeno?
Is it? I just thought I would create feedback. And back then, we were trying, as AGC, we were trying to put like programs that gave these operators a true, like a license, like our crane operator. And it never got off the ground because the other association, the only other parties would be, we could never get together. So it leads me to believe that, yes, training is required, but we still have these.
How do we get there?
We still have these operators in this equipment. License. You know, I know how to operate it, and people just go based on some minor training, you're letting these guys, because I know in New Jersey and New York, I mean, you gotta have a true license to operate these.
Right.
pieces of equipment.
And in lived in New Jersey for 13 years and in Chicago for 4, where is a mostly a union environment, right? So when you call the hall and when you request an equipment operator and you specify the specific, you know, I want an operator for this specific piece of equipment, the union takes care of all of that training, and all you got to do is provide, you know, request the information is all there, because they put them through that through the apprenticeship program, right? By the time you become a journeyman, you have all of the certifications, whether you're a plumber, equipment operator, carpenter, like I said, right? Whatever it is, right? But here, where it's just an, you know, right to work environment, right? When you hire an employee, because of the experience that person has, right? Now, how do you vouch for that? Does OSHA require you to provide? Absolutely. If an employee comes up and, you know, well, yeah, I know how to operate that thing. Yes, but you have not been through our company training, right? And that way, you know that you've covered yourself legally, and you're protecting the company, you're minimizing the company's risk. So yes, absolutely, I would say that you need to put that person through training, because when you hire that employee, again, when you hire them because of the experience that they have, the skills, right? But just because a person has skills, it doesn't mean that, and I've had this conversation with some of our supervisors, there's a big difference between skilled employee and good employee. A skilled employee is the one that you hire. A good employee is the one that you develop. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
We currently own our own aerial. Using 120 MEWP. Is there a specific training for that standalone thing?
And
The training provided for the 80.
and somebody could, probably have more knowledge than me. I would say that when you do the online training or the classroom type of training, it has a tendency to be a little bit more general and focused, but that has to be coupled with hands-on, and the hands-on really should be with the type of equipment that the person is going to be using. It's just like a respirator, right? Is it, how's it going to be fit tested with a dust mask, with a cartridge respirator, or with a layer line respirator, right? So I think that training has to be very specific to what that person is going to, because yes, absolutely. It's the same thing as it's a mute. So scissors lift or boom lift has to be specific.
Questions? No? Jose?
Coño, what a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Hey, thank you very much to Sunbelt and Jose for presenting today. We look forward to having you back. And yeah, we look forward to having you as a guest in the future. Really quickly, Sunbelt and a lot of other you guys are going to be participating in our safety fair. For those of you who aren't aware, our safety fair is coming back after a 2-year hiatus. The date for that is going to be April 1st. It is something that we do for the benefit of the entire construction community. If you're interested in participating in our safety fair, which is a full day event on Saturday, April 1st, we provide absolutely free training to folks. We have a morning session class from 8 to 12. It's a 4-hour class. We provide lunch to the attendees joining us. We then do another session from 1 to 5 p.m. We're looking for instructors. We're looking for folks to assist us on volunteering the day of the event. So please help us out. We don't do this for profit. We do it out of love, and we need your help in order to be able to buy breakfast and lunch for these folks that come in. The last time that we did it, we had about close to 300 folks in attendance and gave out about just under 500 certificates of training, I believe was the number. So it's very impressive. It's creating a safer work environment for all of our employees, especially those frontline folks that are on the job working and in those pieces of heavy equipment. So you can come up and talk to us after the session. We'll be happy to help you out. That being said, someone else is hosting a safety fair, and when they asked if they could talk about it, we said absolutely. I want to invite Ray Padron to come up here, and he's going to be speaking about what he and the Roofing Contractors Association of South Florida are going to be doing on February 25th. Sir, there you go.
How's everybody doing, huh? Good. Great presentation, by the way. Future member of AGC, by the way. I need to get involved. This is a great group, and I miss coming to the meetings. Oh, thank you. I am safety director for Lakeside Roofing and Sheet Metal, and a few years back ago, I got on board with an organization called the Roofing Contractors Association of South Florida, RCASF. Check us out. It's rcasf.org. We're very involved in community projects, outreach, Make-A-Wish Foundation. We've been around for over 40 years, if you don't know about us. We do a lot of the roofs on the buildings that your GC's built. I think we even did this one. So we started talking last year, the need to train and educate those roofers that do those jobs. You know how safe these roofers are? They're very safe, right? Good. It's a challenge, all right? So as being a part of the committee for safety and technical, we're putting together an educational training day on the 25th of this month. It's kind of short notice, but you're gonna learn best safety practices, modified bitumen installation, torching instruction, liquid applied, single ply transitions. You probably don't know what that means, but that's the different new technologies in roofing that we have out there today. Take this information back to your company. There's a lot of new project managers and superintendents that don't know squat. We're gonna have the manufacturers representatives there teaching, and then we're gonna have different stations that we're gonna rotate around. We're gonna start around at 6 in the morning, serving a hot breakfast, 6 in the morning, while we get the Cuban time to come in and be starting at 7, right? And then we're gonna have OSHA there. We're gonna have USF there, outreach. We're gonna have Milwaukee there. We're gonna have a big group. At the end, we're gonna have a hot lunch, $35. Okay, not bad to get educated. So check us out, rcasf.org. And anyway, and again, I'm going to be promoting the AGC Safety Fair as well. All right, man. Thank you, everybody.
So thank you, Ray. It's a good work that you all are doing over there at the Roofers Association. Hey, it's time for AGC of America's National AGC Safety Award. That is called NASA, is what they call it. Applying is very easy. All we need from you all is your sections G, H, I, and J of your OSHA 300A, which if you all are responsible, you should have turned in by now, correct? Am I correct in saying that? So we'll be getting all of that out to you via email. Hey, if you're a GC or a sub, doesn't matter. You can all apply for this award. So do it. Let me see what other details. All you'll be receiving the application following this meeting, and we have 2 weeks to get those in. So I'll get that info out to you all ASAP. We have, speaking of awards, we have South Florida AGC's Build Florida Awards presented by the Nielsen Hoover Group, and that is coming up on March 3rd at the Hard Rock Hotel and Casino. This organization's 100 years old, and in our 100-year history, we have not had a project awards program, which is crazy to me. Your company's built some incredible buildings, and they should be celebrated. And that's what we're going to do. We extended the time to submit. So if you guys go to our website, which is floridaagc.com, you will see right there a big button for the Build Florida Awards. Click it, check it out. It's really easy to apply. We made sure it's very easy to apply. So get on there. Come on out and join us. It's going to be a party. It's not going to be a boring awards event. I already got 4 hours of open bar penciled in. So make sure you Uber there for lunch. Okay. And that's it. I want to thank all of our sponsors today, Milwaukee, Kelley Kronenberg for hosting us, Universal Engineering for breakfast. Thank you very much. Sunbelt Rentals, thank you for being with us here today. And I want to thank the members of our safety committee, Debbie, Ian Schwartz. Ian's out there in the internet world. Mr. Mark Leon, Enrique Sequeira, and Mr. Brian Cardona. I look forward to seeing you all next month. Thank you very much.